in, everybody, whether you're on the East Coast, West Coast, or around the world. Welcome to Coast. And, of course, we got Philly on the beach. What is happening? And, of course, Stat Guy showing up.
From the left coast. From the left coast.
Well, I mean, that brings the true statement of coast to coast, right? Here I am on the West Coast. All right.
Good.
So how you guys doing today?
We got a fun one today. Not only are we talking about how, hey, Bobrovsky was the second one to grab the cup after Barkov, the captain. So congratulations to the Florida Panthers. I'm so glad they beat the Oilers because I was talking a lot of smack on them all series long. And how about Connor winning the Conn Smythe?
Yeah.
As a loser.
Right? I was surprised. I thought Bobrovsky was going to get it because they won. But, not very often that the MVP goes to the guy on the losing side.
And I think the game that cost Bobrovsky that award was that 8-1 loss.
Yeah, that would make sense.
I think that's the game where it was like, well, oh well.
All right. But
you know what? He gets to hold up the bigger cup.
Exactly. He gets to hold up the one that means more.
Of the two, give me hardware every time.
Exactly.
All right, so we got a guest today, which is awesome. He's a writer for Big Cat Country, Jaguar game day analyst for A7BN Sports, and of course, co-host of the Duval Dive. And you see him with me on Tuesday nights on Inside the Pigskin with the South Florida Tribune. Help me welcome in Travis D. Holmes. How's it going, man?
Doing well, brother. Thank you for having me. Philly sports guy on the beach. All we missing is the Mai Tai. What's going on, man?
I didn't want to pull that out. I try to set a good example for the kids.
After Jay yesterday, I don't think it matters.
Hey,
exactly.
What you're doing right now, Philly, is you're auditioning to take Michael Cera's spot in those Corona commercials with Snoop Dogg.
I mean, that's not a bad spot to be, though.
That's exactly correct.
Sign me up for some Corona commercials. I'm in.
But I'm sorry. I have to, Travis. When I heard you were coming on, I had to go. I have to go dead into this right now. Right now, how do you feel about the highest paid quarterback in the NFL being on your team?
Technically speaking, yes, highest paid quarterback in the NFL, or at least tied for the highest. I mean, but that's the way the money goes, man. That's like saying I have the most expensive house on the block, but I also bought it most recently. It is what it is. That's the market, baby. At the end of the day, if you want a house, you got to pay the cost for the house. I mean, unfortunately, the cost of bread, what it used to cost, don't cost these days. Like, that's where we are with the market. But if you're looking in real dollars, and by real dollars, I simply mean dollars in relation to where the salary cap is these days, because obviously inflation is taking place. This is still significantly cheaper than Joe Burrow's contract. Like, I mean, at this current moment, we're still looking at Trevor Lawrence going to be ranked anywhere from a 9th to an 11th. And that's right now in actual practical guarantees. Whereas, Joe Burrow was looking at, he was 24% of the Bengals contract when he signed, of the Bengals cap space when he signed his contract back then. Whereas Trevor Lawrence is only at 21%. Like, if we're really talking a real apples to apples comparison, $1 those days doesn't buy you what $1 these days costs. So yeah, it's $55 million. And by the time we get to the end of this season, more likely than not, he won't even be the highest paid quarterback, because Tua, or whether, talking Dak by the start of next season, and except by the time we get done with all of this, man, it's going to be like the Kristen Kirk contract all over again, where everybody went crazy, and then you get one season left and like, oh, dang, that was a bargain. Like, we know what this is, because we know the money the money's always going to go up. So Trevor Lawrence is fine, and the contract is what it is.
So you think he's worth it?
Worth it? I mean, worth it is a hard conversation for me always, because, again, I'm a former football player. If the market tells you you're worth it, you're worth it. And if somebody's willing to pay it, you're worth it. Like, I don't know how to make those two things come together. Like, hey, man, if my job's willing to pay me $300,000 to sit down and just drink lemonade and not actually do anything all day, I guess I'm worth it, right? And if Trevor Lawrence goes out to the market tomorrow, is he getting paid $60 million? Absolutely. I think I can name 10 teams that will absolutely give him that. So is he worth it?
Especially
So you feel that you really do feel that he is worth the $60 million a year. That because ultimately whether he's paying, whether the Jaguars are paying it or somebody else was going to pay it, you think somebody else was going to pay that?
Oh, you
for
don't?
him.
No, so
I don't
you
think so. I don't think
don't
so.
believe if Trevor Lawrence is a free agent on the market today at his age that he's not getting paid $60 million from the Dallas Cowboys right now, who won't even pay it to Dak? You don't think that would happen?
No, not for
I
the
don't think
Cowboys.
so.
Well, sorry, not the Dallas Cowboys with this current coaching staff. Like assuming they flumbled, they fired the coaching staff and everything else, and they
Sure.
just rebuild. You don't think they're paying him $60 million?
No.
I think someone will because that's the going rate of a quarterback. But at the same time, I don't think Trevor Lawrence is worth $45 million.
Well,
Right.
I mean, the problem.
In my opinion, Patrick Mahomes is the standard, and
Yeah,
anyone
so
that's
let's-
making
so let's
more than
talk about
Patrick Mahomes is not worth it.
So let's talk about it.
problem with
I
that
agree.
right there
I agree
is
with
Daniel
you.
Jones. Daniel Jones set the benchmark at 40,
Yeah.
being terrible. So,
Bingo.
so I mean, that argument doesn't really work, especially the 45. I mean, you can make an argument that just about everybody is going to make 40 plus because Daniel Jones had one okay year that wasn't even really because of him getting 40.
So Daniel Jones' contract essentially is the Blake Bortles contract on crack. And if you know about, again, just keeping it in Jaguar land, like that, Jaguar fans, they know exactly what I'm talking about. And if you're saying that Pat Mahomes is the standard, all right, cool. Let's have that conversation from that exact standpoint. Pat Mahomes being the standard. If Trevor Lawrence would have turned around and said, I will take $40 million or I will take $45 million right now per year if you give me a 10-year contract. If I'm the Jaguars, I will slam the table and sign that immediately. Trevor Lawrence himself said his agents and himself had already come to agreement before negotiations even began. He wanted a 4 to 5 year contract. Initially, it was rumored that the team was looking to offer him a 6-year contract and trying to get a discount on the numbers. And Trevor was like, no, 5 is the limit that they're willing to go. So if you're saying that, all right, 5 is the limit, you kind of got the Daniel Jones contract in this contract. Like, I don't know where the, I guess, the issue would be if you're looking at the guaranteed numbers. Again, if you're looking at the percentage of the salary cap, if you're looking at practical guarantees and the way that the contract was structured with the two, basically the options at the end of the contract, they're not even paying the quote unquote $55 million a year. Because he's going to hit, what, $78 million cap hit when you get down to 2028, 2029 season. They're going to restructure at that time. So we're talking practical guarantees, not like the nonsense money, not the money you're never going to see. Not, we're talking real money in the way that it's structured. What are we talking about at that point? Like, we really are talking about Trevor Lawrence getting around $45 million a year anyways, and Stat Guy is dancing in the streets looking, feeling very happy because he got the number that he wanted. But the agent gets to say, I got $55 million a year. But you got essentially what you're talking about while he's able to dance in the streets saying, I got the $55 million. I think everybody wins there.
I mean, I guess the way I look at it, and Bo and James can obviously attest to this a lot too, just because I work with a lot of baseball. Like, I do a lot of coaching, and I'm involved with a lot of baseball stuff throughout the year. And I kind of look at it like the Rob Manfred situation, especially with free agency this year, where he's trying to get his client the top dollar, everything that he thinks they're worth. But in reality, the only thing that Rob Manfred bases his clients off of is the production that they had the year going into free agency. He doesn't take the previous 4 or 5 years into account where his client was struggling, where it's like at some point these athletes that think they're worth 50, 60, 70 million because that's what the going rate for the market is. At some point, they also need the reality check and say, I had one good year. My other 4 years are not what $45, $50 million quarterbacks look like. They need to have
what? If you can get your good year in the contract year, good on you.
Yeah,
right. I mean,
with Trevor Lawrence didn't have his good year in his contract year. He had his good year before his contract year.
So that leads into a very interesting conversation because I actually don't know if I agree with that. Everyone feels it's all about vibes, baby. It's all about how we feel around this. Like, so everyone feels that Trevor Lawrence didn't have a good year because of how the year went, and rightfully so. But if you're looking at the games, and again, I'm looking at every single play at least 3 times all season for Trevor Lawrence, including training camp. Like, this is a little bit. I'm obviously a little deep in this matrix. So I get that not everyone's putting that kind of work in, that kind of time in. But when I have to argue with the people who don't watch the games, or I have to have these kind of hard conversations of, hey, he had a rough year. And I'm like, I mean, kind of, but also not really. Like, if you're talking about his interceptions, more than 50% of his interceptions don't fall on him. Literally, 4 of his 14 interceptions were. And I actually wrote an article on BigCatCountry.com this past on Monday that just went crazy because of the deep dive that it was into who Trevor Lawrence is. Please take a look at that.
Yep,
Anyone who
that
if
link
you're
is actually in the bio. So if you're watching on YouTube, the link is in there.
Yeah, so he literally had 14 interceptions, and 4 of them was actually his fault. And I know every quarterback is going to have 2 or 3 of those, but it was truly a comedy of errors if you're looking at his tape, the individual tape. Hey, he's throwing a ball to a running back on a check down. The ball hits them in the front of the face mask, bounces 4 yards downfield, and someone picks it off. Something like that happens twice. He hits the receiver in the chest. It bounces up in the air 3 yards upfield, the linebacker intercepts it from who's trailing the play. Something like that happens twice. Like, and there's a list of these. And then he has a boatload of miscommunications because he was injured late in the season. Like, it's stuff like that. So when I'm like, all right, cool. If I'm not looking at those plays and trying to ding him for them, then what kind of a season that Trevor Lawrence has? Well, he probably would have had like something close to a 25 to 30 touchdown season with 4 to 5 interceptions. Well, we aren't having the same conversation all of a sudden. If we're talking about that sort of quarterback, we're talking about, no, that dude does deserve $60 million. And it's all because of his, I can't say all, because Trevor does, he has those bonehead Josh Allen type of plays that you're just like, what the hell was that? And he's going to have those 4 to 5 times a season. But
every quarterback suffers from some bad bounces, though.
But outside of those plays that you just like, dang it, man, what are you doing, bro? Outside of those, you're going to be very happy with the production that he's giving you overall and the stats that he's giving you. And that just becomes this whole push and pull from the national media guys versus the guys who literally are like doing the hard work. I'm looking at every single play, and this guy just has no supporting cast. And all the advanced stats kind of support it.
The fumbles on other people, though.
Yeah. Can I? Oh, can I? Let's talk about it. Come on.
Now you sound like me when I try to defend Kirk Cousins all the time.
So this is fun though.
So you can debate me not recovering your own fumble, but he had some non-contact fumbles.
He had 2. He basically does this like twice a year. That is just like, what? Again, this is why I said those five bonehead plays a year. If you are able to just take those and just be like, hey man, I love her, she's beautiful. Like, if you got a wife, you got a girlfriend, I love her, she's beautiful. But every so often, man, she gonna do something that just embarrass the heck out of me. One day a year, just one day a year, she's just gonna embarrass the mess out of me. But if I can take that one day, I'm gonna get 364 days that I'm just gonna be in love with this beautiful, awesome, wonderful woman. That's Trevor Lawrence. If you can take that, you will be a happy man most of the time. But he's gonna give you that one play that just like, I'm gonna just stay off Twitter for the next few days because I know this ain't gonna be pretty. The responses I'm gonna get from all the boys, right? Like, that's what it is. So he's gonna give you those turnovers ever so often, and that's just like, you just can't. You have no excuse for that, even for a high school athlete. And then he's going to give you those plays where not very many dudes can do this. Like 2 to 3 dudes in the NFL that just like, hey man, they're not making that throw. They're not putting it in that pocket. And what do you do with that? But so to your point, yes, he has a fumbling problem as far as how often he fumbles the ball. However, the Jacksonville Jaguars are literally, and I don't mean this, that like I crunched the numbers, they're in that article on Trevor Lawrence Breakdown, are the worst team at fumble recovery over the last 2 years since Doug Peterson began being their coach. They are the worst team, followed by the Seattle Seahawks, oddly. I was not aware of that one.
As far as jumping on them, but there is a distinct difference between our two teams when it comes to how many times we're throwing it on the carpet.
I was just about to say that. So you guys have a smaller sample size because you're actually closer to middle of the pack in the amount of you guys being the Seattle Seahawks are closer to the middle of the pack in how often you fumble the ball. The Jaguars are 6th in the league in as far as how often they fumble the ball, which again, I covered in the article. But the most interesting part of this is none of the other teams in the top 6 are even in the top 15 in fumble recovery rate.
Oops.
So what I mean by that is none of the other 8 teams in the top 8 have an issue recovering fumbles. And because of that, Dun, 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 dun. They don't have this same issue, even though they fumble the ball a lot. The Jaguars actually legitimately seem to have a problem just jumping on the ball, unlike someone like the Arizona Cardinals, who have 3 less fumbles than Trevor Lawrence. The Arizona Cardinals, with all of their rotation of quarterbacks, with Kyler Murray being injured, have 3 less fumbles than Trevor Lawrence. Yet they recover his fumbles at half the rate. So what I mean is, they're the lowest in the league, and the Jaguars are highest in the league. So if Trevor Lawrence is on a team like that, we literally are not discussing his fumble issue.
Yeah, I mean, so some of that is just luck of how the ball bounces. I mean, because I remember watching one where the Niners get this ball, and a football never bounces straight, right? It's kind of a weird shape. And they had one that rolled straight down the sideline. For 15 yards. I mean, you know, sometimes that's how it goes. That's picking up my voice somehow.
Okay.
Well. So beyond all that.
Yeah. I'm not sure who's.
Yeah, we got a big echo going on.
Yeah. There we go. Yep.
All right, good. No echo now anymore. So beyond all that, the interceptions weren't his fault. The fumbles weren't his fault. So all of a sudden, I guess if nothing's his fault, then he's worth every bit of the $60 million a year.
I promise that is not what I'm saying. I promise, and I know that's what it comes across as. Hear me out. All that I'm saying is not many of the guys who have a bad supporting cast are being held to the same standard as Trevor Lawrence. Like, most of the guys who have bad supporting cast just suck. They just think they objectively, you're just talking about getting rid of them and putting them, on a bus somewhere and just getting them out of the different organizations that they're in. And Trevor Lawrence just happens to be good enough to drag a bad team kicking and screaming that we're even having a conversation of this guy being a top 10 quarterback. That is the argument that I am making. I am not saying that he is a top 3 guy, top 5 guy in the league. I am saying that he is so dang good that he makes you even have to have this conversation, in spite of the fact that they've been drafting terrible, in spite of the fact that they've given him a bad center for the last 2 years, which happened to coincide with all of these issues that he's having. In spite of the fact that, we know that he has an offensive line that is a problem, which was why he has the second fastest time to throw rate in the league. They have to build an offense around that because they just don't have the time. Anytime he holds the ball more than 3 seconds, he's going to either be pressured or sacked. We know all these things. And in spite of all that, we're still going to ding him for every bad thing. And we know he has no supporting cast. So he's in the 29th percentile on PFF's QBS, which is basically the supporting cast, the support that each quarterback is given from the supporting cast. The only other quarterback that is in that entire percentile is CJ Stroud, and still being successful. It's literally Trevor Lawrence, CJ Stroud. That's the list. CJ just happens to be great, and Trevor Lawrence is great in 2022, and we will see what CJ looks like. In 2023, maybe he'll have that rebound. Keep it going up. Maybe he might regress a little bit. We'll see. But nevertheless, we've kind of seen this story. Most quarterbacks just struggle with a bad supporting cast, but everyone wants to say it's Trevor, and no one wants to have the global conversation of, hey, how good is this Trent Baalke guy that none of us liked when he was in San Francisco and they kind of kicked him out and didn't build it? We're not having any of that conversation, and we're just going to say it's all Trevor, in spite of the tape saying otherwise. That's a rough conversation.
I mean, I don't think we're saying it's all Trevor. We're just saying, he makes bad decisions too.
Yeah, so does Josh Allen.
Nobody's debating that.
But that's what I'm saying. But is Josh Allen worth the money?
But hold on. Josh Allen has had a little bit more
added element of the running ability with him.
Sorry, we got both of you going at the same time.
And he's had more success. Josh Allen has had a lot more success. Has made it to AFC championship games. I mean, obviously he hasn't gone to the promised land yet because of the gunslinger in him, because of some of the bad decisions he likes to make. I can't even say that Lawrence is any bit of that gunslinger in him yet. Yeah. Now, I do have an appreciation for your coach, and I know that your coach is worth his weight in salt. So
certainly not his rookie-year coach, but the current one.
Right.
Okay.
So
Go ahead.
I mean, I could go along as far to say is that yes, because it was his second year with this coach, he finally did have a sophomore slump. Because truth of the matter is that you guys should have won that division going away. There's no reason why Houston should have won.
Yes.
But Houston won.
Especially
And
the way
now
this
Houston
started.
and then Houston has gone crazy this year, which means it's going to be really difficult for you to come back to either win the division or even get a wild card spot.
I think so. I can agree with the vast majority of what you just said. I still do have questions on Doug Peterson, and that's just me being honest about it. Like again, he is a solid coach, and he is a good enough coach to build you a solid contender. I think he is absolutely that. I don't know that he is that consecutive or consistent Super Bowl appearance kind of coach, even though he made it to the Super Bowl on an occasion and still made it to the playoffs. But I don't know that he's that guy that's going to consistently get you there versus being the guy that's just going to be able to get you at a balanced average place. And then you have to hire that next guy to get you there. Like, I don't know which one he is, if I'm being honest about that. But he's a good enough coach, to your original point.
Going off of what you just said, though, outside of Bill Belichick and Andy Reid, who are coaches that are going to consistently get you to the Super Bowl?
So coaches that I believe are to that standard at least. So whether or not they do it, coaches that are to that standard, I will probably put somebody like a Kyle Shanahan obviously up there, even if they struggle on occasion. I mean, it is what it is that he has an issue with quarterbacks, but Kyle Shanahan has got to be up there.
That's probably the only three that are consistently getting to the championship games of the Super Bowl. Otherwise, the rest of the NFL, you have a team that gets there like Cincinnati, and then the next couple of years they take a step back. A team like Baltimore or Buffalo that get there, and then the next couple of years they take a step back.
You're not necessarily wrong, and those are also some dogfight divisions. I actually will give you credit on that. But then you still have guys like the Mike Tomlins, like the guy up in for the Rams. You still have these guys, Matt LaFleur. Like you still have these guys that I'm just like, but those are good enough guys. They are good enough to get you there. But there's still the other pieces of what's going on with the rosters, what's going on with the quarterbacks, and all those moving pieces. But nevertheless, as far as the coach specifically, I feel like those are guys who I believe will consistently get you there, and they'll at least get you consistently to the playoffs with a shooting chance at getting into the a championship appearance. Those types of guys. I don't know if Doug Peterson's that guy, and he hasn't necessarily shown us to be that guy just yet. And I feel like that's being fair to him.
So let me ask this question. I'm gonna turn it around a lot here. Do you feel that going overseas and playing 2 games a year in Europe affects this team in a negative way?
I think they will feel the exact opposite.
Yeah, I agree.
And the reason I say that is because they actually had it. They hit the Texans game in I believe it was week 3 this year. And then they had another game, the game against the Chiefs. So it was 2 games back to back that they just were not playing well. It was a really rough stretch, and to the point where I think they were reading their media a little too closely. They were feeling themselves a little bit too much, and they needed to get away from the Jacksonville market. And I'm not saying that was actual; those were actual quotes from actual players and coaches saying, "Hey, the crowd was too loud," and all these other things that you would never hear an NFL person or an NFL coach say. But they said it, and they needed to just get away from the noise, quote unquote, and get away from home so they can try to refine themselves. And they did. They won both games over in London, and then they came back and I believe they won against Indianapolis, and it was like, all right, this is good times. We're 8-3, everything's great. And then they just lost. They actually were worse at home than anywhere else in 2023. The Jaguars had a losing record at their home field and had a winning record on the road. It was the weirdest thing. So it was weird that it's the exact opposite of everything you'd hope for from your team. They were terrible. Yeah, they were terrible when you're seeing them in person, and they were great whenever you're watching them on TV and hanging out with your buddies. But that's what it was. So they seem to work well overseas, and weirdly, that's the place where they make the most money because they say every away game in London counts as like a game and a half, or a game in 3/4 for as far as the profit is concerned. So I'm sure Shad Khan's happy.
Yeah.
Well, yeah. I mean, he's happy because he gets to bring his other team back home to where his other team plays. So I mean, let's face it. It's always a money grab for him.
Yeah.
And he gets all of that money because he's the one that kind of really started to initiate it.
Yeah.
That being said, I'm not. Yeah, they won those 2 games, and then they came home, and they won that first game, but then went on the losing streak, which is what I felt. That's kind of the same thing that the Phillies did when they went over to London. They didn't win both games, but they went over there, and then they came back home, and they went on a little bit of a losing streak.
So that losing streak was weird. It's because it was mainly surrounding around injuries, and I know no one wants to say that but it's you have to acknowledge like these things are just objective truths. We were asking gladiators who get hit by a car 50 times a day to kind of just fight through it, and then as it continues to become this snowball effect, and you just start having injuries. Trevor Lawrence dealt with 5 injuries in 6 weeks. He ended up not being able to practice 2 days. He only practiced 2 days in those 6 weeks, actual practice. Like it was to the point where we get to Friday, he hadn't practiced, and he would either play, or Friday, and he would get this little walkthrough practice, which if you've seen is not much of a practice as far as getting on the same page with your receivers and doing audibles. It's all mental reps. When that happens to coincide with the worst play you've seen from your quarterback on the days that he simply doesn't practice with the offensive staff, and you're having these quote unquote miscommunications or mental breakdowns between the receivers and the quarterback, that sounds like that those are the reasons that these things are happening. At the same time, you're having offensive line injuries. Ezra Cleveland, the left tackle, that they've now traded for from Minnesota, he's injured. You have Cam Robinson, the left tackle. He's injured. You have the only one that's healthy at that point is the center, who's the 33rd ranked center in the league for PFF. That's the one. That's probably the only one you don't want playing. And he's the only one that's healthy. Brandon Scherf, the right guard, he's injured. Like you at that point, what are you working with around you? And that's just offense. You got injuries at the DB core. Tyson Campbell, the starting corner, he's injured, and he's trying to go through his hamstring injury, but he's struggling. And everyone's just saying Jaguars, they fumbled the ball. Absolutely, they fumbled the ball, but they also were they were a ward unit. Like, well, I don't know what you do with that.
Tons of teams deal with that, though. The Seahawks had a very similar situation. They lost half of their offensive line week 1. They didn't get them back until week 15. The Vikings, they didn't have a quarterback all season. Basically, they just waited out guys. So, I mean, that's always a tough argument to make because football is really attrition. Whatever team has the best shot, it doesn't always mean you're the best or most talented roster. It just meant you kept on the field.
Thank you. But that was the thing is the Jaguars, when no one would have had the expectation of the Jaguars had they not gone on that run at the end of the 2022 season. And everyone's forgetting about what happened at the start of the 2022 season. Like everybody only remembers the good times, like all humans, we have short-term memory, like whatever. We only remember the good stuff. We forget the bad stuff pretty quickly.
Well, the bad stuff. That's what they're talking about with the Jordan Love contract, right? Everybody's like, oh, he's going to be the next highest paid guy and all of this. It's like he had 6 good games.
It sounds very similar to the Trevor Lawrence conversation going into 2023. That's kind of where, so he can either go left or he can go right. I guess we'll see how that season starts out, but yeah, right now we don't have enough to really build a real story around who he is at this point. Jordan Love, to be clear.
Yeah, but I mean, when you look at last year for Jordan Love, the beginning of the season was not good.
Right.
The middle of the season was okay, and then he had 6 good games to finish the year, and then a great showing in the playoffs.
Right, but that's Trevor Lawrence in 2022
for sure. But then, they're saying the same type of stuff that Trevor Lawrence just got. They're like, oh, you got to pay him and all of this. It's like, man, I've seen 6 games. I'm not that excited about it. It's similar with Trevor Lawrence. I look at this contract and I'm like,
But with Trevor Lawrence, we've seen a season and a half. And again, if you're looking at the season, it basically means that 2023 has to be looked at with a microscope. You have to look at 20 because of how it was, because of its supporting cast, because of how most of the interceptions happen, because of how half the fumbles happen. We never even got into that part of it. Also, you guys are talking about his fumbles. I can show you a tweet right now, and I'll share it to you, Bo, in a second. Talking about his first 6 fumbles in 2023, and you tell me how many of them you feel that were his fault, because I counted 1. That's fumbles. These are fumbles. These are his first 6 fumbles in 2023. Because you guys were like, well, fumbles are his fault. And I'm like, I don't know about that
No,
either.
I mean,
Quarterback.
even ones that aren't necessarily your fault, like somebody like your tackle
Lateral,
lets a guy
laterals, early snaps, just ridiculous,
through.
like
Yeah, okay.
that's
So
what I'm talking
bad
about.
snaps. Fair enough. That always goes down as a quarterback fumble, even though that rarely has to do with the quarterback. Especially because I know he had one where it just launched over his head. That gets accredited to him. That's not really his fault. But there are plenty of them, even when you get blindside hit.
Right.
That, I mean,
those are his fault, technically speaking, but also,
well,
kind of not.
You do have to start to feel those. He is, although you don't want to credit him with that first year because Urban Meyer was a train wreck. This is his 3rd year, right? So, I mean, like some of these things you got to start to feel at this point in your career. Now, have you had a weird path to get through year 3? Sure. But on-field experience still happens. And so some of those things you do have to start to feel as a quarterback, or you end up with a lot of fumbles.
I agree. And so, but I just want to make sure I keep that narrative around him saying, hey, he has all these stats in 3 years. And then it's like, well, what about that first year was a train wreck? Like that should not be held against anyone in that situation. Like,
No, it was a dumpster fire.
You know what I mean? Like,
No
that's
question.
such a dumpster fire you would not be crazy to say that Urban Meyer was one of the worst coaches in NFL history. And to say that, like, that's not hyperbole at that point.
No,
like,
you
can
could argue
actually
he
say
was
that
the worst one to ever do it
for a rookie quarterback.
Yeah,
and then to hold those
I'd
stats
say
against him.
I'd say he's the second worst.
I mean, he's up there with Bobby Bonita, though. I mean, then it's not. I mean, that in all of sports, and that's kind of what I'm talking about.
I put Adam
Gase
up there ahead of
Ooh,
Meyer.
Adam Gase.
Adam Gase ruined like 3 quarterbacks consecutively.
I mean, you're not wrong, but I don't know that Gase is quite on that Urban Meyer where he did so many bad things in the stretch of one season. I mean, Urban Meyer went out of his way to look like the biggest douche possible, week in and week out. And it wasn't just in the game, like kicking kickers, doing weird stuff at the bar. Like, I mean, you couldn't have scripted a more like TMZ version of a.
He didn't get on the plane. He didn't get on the plane after the game in Ohio, and then is caught in a bar with a lady that's not his. Bruh, what are we? What?
Like, you couldn't have had a more distraction-based quarterback, or coach than Urban Meyer was.
He wanted to flip the whole playbook after like 3 weeks or 4 weeks or whatever it was after they lost the game that he expected them to win. He treated it like college, like, hey, if things aren't going right, just start it all over. We just spent all offseason installing all of this. Wait, what? You can't just. That dude was not it, like, in all the ways. So yeah, and to count that against him is just like, what? We can't do that, man. Come on. So his first 10 games, his first 7-8 games in 2022, he had 10 touchdowns and 10 turnovers. And then from that moment on, we saw this basically all pro or at least Pro Bowl quarterback. And I would argue that we saw the same thing in 2023. His supporting cast has let him down, like, significantly.
So I can get with Paul a little bit here. Chip Kelly, the worst coach in history. I mean,
yep.
Yeah, he definitely has a case for it. He did some actual damage on that team. So you're not wrong.
He tried to set the franchise back like 25 years.
I mean,
Can I throw another name in there?
Okay.
Nathaniel Hackett.
Oh, another Jaguars legend. Let's go.
Nathaniel Hackett had no business being a head coach. The only reason why he was brought there was because he told everybody in Denver that if you hire me, I can get Aaron Rodgers to come here. And when that didn't happen, you knew his days were numbered in Denver.
I mean, but he was so good with Blake Bortles, right? The AFC Championship, Blake Bortles, they had Blake Bortles like top 5 in like EPA at that time. It was crazy.
Yeah.
You just knew it wasn't going to work out.
You got to throw Josh McDaniels in there too.
Is that worse than history though? That's just people paying him free money.
The thing. Like, you can be bad, but we're talking just next level, absolute trash at the position. And it's kind of a small list. But Chip Kelly for sure. I mean, Hackett was not fantastic, but Urban is. I mean, he's right there.
He's squarely in that list.
Yeah, there's no doubt. And Rob, to answer your question here, Did I think Geno was going to get what he got? Yeah, because that was a discount even when he signed it. I mean, for a starting quarterback, what he signed, that's cheap. Because there's a lot of backups that get what he has.
and going back to what I said before, Geno Smith is a victim of Adam Gase. Geno Smith was with Adam Gase in New York, and Adam Gase produced a lot of quarterbacks. And then once he got away from Adam Gase, Geno Smith finally lived up to his potential.
Yeah, I mean,
so Geno Smith's contract, yeah, I mean, 25. What is it? 25 million a year?
Yeah.
Lord,
yeah, it's cheap.
Oof.
Cheap.
That's wide receiver money.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, not even high wide receiver money. Okay, yeah. Not bad.
No, that's why I always laugh when people are, trying to say, get Geno out of here. It's like, get him out of there for what?
Yeah.
What is your plan beyond that?
You don't have to sign another guy in free agency that's going to make the same, if not more. And
you're going to sign a guy that makes more, that's not familiar with the organization. And you're not getting a top level guy. So what, you're going to swap out mid for mid? Like, what are you even talking about right now?
Unless they want a full rebuild, like maybe you have a chance of trading him or something. But that's about all. I mean, because somebody will trade for that contract, for that production specifically.
Tomorrow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oof. Okay.
And we're at the bottom of the hour.
So we are. We are at that halfway point. We will run through some commercials real quick, and we'll start it off with True Fusion Gym right here in Western Washington. 3 locations, one in Bellevue, Ballard, and their new one in University Village. You can use the QR code on the screen, get a free 5-day pass at all 3 locations. You can get Pilates, boot camp, yoga, bar. Find your edge at True Fusion Gym. And then, of course, also here in the Pacific Northwest, our AFL team comes home for their final game of the season after beating out South Kansas. So, yeah, if you go to Ticketmaster, you can get 50% off if you do Pack 50. And come on out. I'm going to be at this game. Come say hi and cheer on our team. All right. Look at us doing actual stuff.
All right, so I know we're gonna let go of the Trevor Lawrence discourse, and I promise I'm going to let it go if you're willing to let it go. But on the off chance you're not willing to let it go, that's just I wanted to make sure I made it. Just made this one additional point clear. We already established that I don't believe that more than half of his interceptions weren't even his fault, and nearly half of his fumbles legitimately weren't his fault. Like if you look at the actual film, and again, I'll send you the tweets, or they're all listed in the article, so you can see by your own eyes the game film that shows, hey man, I see what you mean. Like, dang, this is like 10 turnovers in the season that literally weren't his fault.
He did have some that were some unfortunate bounces.
It's egregious, man. Yeah, you say unfortunate bounces. I say, where's your offensive line trailing the play? First off, why is your center snapping the ball over your head? Why is the center snapping the ball early and low? Why is this happening? Why is this happening? Why is this happening? And it's just a lot of those questions that have nothing to do with Trevor, and it's all about team roster management and things of that nature. That's in addition to the fact that he had double-digit touchdowns dropped.
So
not just regular drops.
I disagree with part of that. Disagree with part of that. So if you have a lot of mistimed snaps, that does start to fall on your quarterback, because that means there's a cadence thing that sounds a lot like when he wants the ball. Yep. So if it happens once or twice, that's on your center. If it happens a lot, that is a communication issue between your quarterback and your center, because there's some part of his cadence that's triggering that.
Yep, Kirk Cousins went through that this year in Minnesota.
No, I can halfway agree with that, because if you get into if you always are getting into an argument with like, if I'm always arguing with my wife, obviously we're having a problem communicating. It might be my fault, but it might be her fault in how she understands it. But
it's your fault. I don't even know who you're lying to.
It's your fault.
But if we go to therapy, if we end up having to go to therapy, and then the therapist is like, "Nah, this is your fault," then I'm kind of going to lean that way. Well, in my opinion, this offseason kind of showed me whose fault it was. Luke Fortner, who we already knew was a bad blocker in run blocking and pass blocking, has now been replaced by Mitch Morris for the Buffalo Bills, who is not like this incredible world-beating, center, but he is an above-average run blocker, and he is a top 5 pass blocking center. That kind of tells me they went out of their way to make sure he was one of their first signings, that they know what the problem is. The problem seemed to be that, I mean, I would even, again, partially agree with you. If it's like, hey, man, if you have a center who's about average, maybe this is a miscommunication issue between Trevor Lawrence and his center. But if you immediately get rid of the center or replace the center and you already knew he was bad, then I'm probably going to lean that route and probably say you probably have an issue with your center. We kind of knew that already. And again, he's had over 10 touchdowns drop because he led the league in EPA for lost EPA over drop passes in the league. Right behind him was Matthew Stafford, but that was again 5 percentage points behind him. Like, we're not talking small numbers. Again, there's a videotape of him because those guys aren't supporting him.
Yeah. At the same time, who was third on that list?
Third on that list was Pat Mahomes at 32.9%. Again, 5% lower than Trevor Lawrence. And we know that the Chiefs had a drop problem because they were, again, top 3 in drops. The Jaguars were like 14th in drops, but just all their drops were touchdowns. So that's what I'm saying. Like, they were just dropping the things that matter. They weren't even dropping the ball all the time. It's just like as soon as something hit their hands in the end zone, it's lemon booty time. It's like everybody's just like everybody's just.
I gotta stop you here because you sound way too much like an apologist.
Oh, really?
Way too much like an apologist.
Let's talk about it.
I really do. All right, so I need you to tell me things that are for real about this team that they need to actually work on, that you see as things that need to improve this year for them to be able to get better off than where they were last year. Because they were in the front of this, they were in the lead the entire time and then blew it to an Indianapolis team that stunk and didn't make the playoffs because of it.
Oh,
so I need you to stop apologizing and
Yes. Yeah.
Sorry, you said the Colts. I just wanted to verify that we were talking about the same. You're talking about the last game of the season, right?
Right. I thought it was the Colts, but it might have been the Saints.
Right. No, I got you. Yeah, it was the Titans. Fine. I fully understand your point. At the end of the day, what you're saying is you believe that I sound like an apologist, which is funny because I literally own a "this team makes me drink" shirt. I can't stand the roster management. I don't like the way that the team has been built in the last multiple years, and I've stated that on the record on multiple podcasts. We've had literally a whole podcast talking about how Trent Baalke should be fired. And that's gonna be.
But not this one. So
I know because these aren't the questions. These aren't the questions that we've been having. We've been talking about why Trevor Lawrence does or does not deserve a contract, and that is a different conversation. Now, if we want to get into roster management and to what went wrong and why it's wrong and why I believe that he's shown the ability to be a good quarterback in spite of everything that's been going on around him. Well, that everything that's going on around him that's a Trent Baalke conversation. That's what we're talking about. So. They were 24th in rushing last year. Well, you have a quarterback who you have an offensive scheme, I should say, that you're trying to be balanced. You don't motion at all. Like, you're nothing like the Miami Dolphins and all of these other teams who are trying to actually make it difficult on defenses. The Athletic had a great deep dive in the middle of the last season talking about how the Jaguars were just one of the most stagnant offenses, period. And with that coach that you love, Doug Peterson, again, I like the coach, generally speaking, but he's not making it easy on the quarterback. He's actually making it harder in that way. And again, you're struggling to run the ball because you have a center who just stinks. You can't run into. You have no interior. You can't block pass blocking in the inside because you have an injured guard. All these things are problems, and you have a quarterback who you're just like, "Hey, man, win it." Okay, well, damn, like that's not easy.
That's exactly what the Bills do.
But yeah, the Bills also fired the OC in the middle of the season because they were doing it badly. Like that's the type of things. Those are the type of decisions that gets people fired, like organizationally. So what they need to do is one of the things they did do, and I actually give them major credit on that. And maybe that's why I sound like an apologist, is because I have a high ceiling. I have a high view of what they're going to be this season, higher than most, because they brought in BTJ, someone who actually is able to stretch a defense and actually likes to block. They had Calvin Ridley, who looked like a pinball trying to block people out there, and I'm just gonna keep it 100. Like, he was a great, solid, route runner and everything else, but he is not that guy who's going to allow you to run on the edges. They brought in Gabe Davis, who does the same. Like, so I think the key to their offense to start off is first getting ETN started. Make ETN great again. We've been hammering that on the Duval Dive, the Jaguars podcast on every Friday. Like, that is what we do, is make ETN great again. You have to be able to run the ball. You have to be 15th or better in the league at rushing, or your offense does not work because it's way too
So
efficient.
I guess let me ask you this then, because PFF has your receiving core as 25th in the league, which is awesome.
Right.
So you were covering OTAs.
Mhm.
What did you see there that
Whew.
makes us think that 25 isn't legitimately what they're going to be?
So it's not even about what they're basing it basically on the fact that the Jaguars lost Calvin Ridley and they gained Brian Thomas Jr. and they don't know what Brian Thomas Jr. is going to be. BTJ, as the kids call him. Like, they don't know what that's going to result in. So they're just saying, hey, the Jaguars, we PFF, they said they had them ranked, the Jaguars receiver course ranked at 5th in the league going into the 2023 season, and after losing Calvin Ridley, now they're basically one of the 8 worst. That's a major jump of one player who was a 71 ranked receiver in your 71 receiver in your PFF scores. That's weird. That's a weird drop at that point. You know what I mean? Uh, I believe Brian Thomas Jr. is better at what the Jaguars want to run in their offense. They want to be more vertical. Like, they want to be a lot, honestly, like the Bills. They just never had the personnel to do it. Like, they wanted to be one of those types of teams where like BTJ can be someone like Stephon Diggs, and they've literally never had a contested catch receiver. That their best contested catch receiver was like a 30 rating, and that was Zay Jones, who was no longer on the team. He's on the Arizona Cardinals.
Yeah.
Like, they wanted Trevor Lawrence to have that T. Higgins type of guy that he had in college, and they've never drafted him. They've never signed that guy. Now they have that guy in BTJ who can stretch defenses and also block on the edges. They then signed another guy who was also very good at doing the same thing, Gabe Davis. He blocks a lot. He goes vertical a lot. He catches a lot of those touchdown passes in this exact same way, who also just happened to come from Buffalo. You noticing that trend? Mitch Morris, Buffalo. Goodness gracious, Gabe Davis, Buffalo. Same kind of scheme, same kind of thought process, and the hope is that they're going to have a vertical offense that is also able to run and have Christian Kirk running underneath with Evan Ingram controlling the intermediate areas of the field. I think they've done those things and trying to find those guys who have the right fit for the team. It's not about skill; it's about the fit. Calvin Ridley didn't fit this offensive scheme, even
Sure.
though like he should have easily had 1,300 yards, 10 plus touchdowns, but he left 300 plus yards and like 5 touchdowns on the field and drops. And that's not like hyperbole. That's like legitimate. Like, he dropped. That's just in drop touchdowns. He had that kind of a rough year. So Calvin Ridley may look okay in Tennessee, but I also believe that BTJ and Gabe Davis will look good in Jacksonville because the fits work better for the offense, or for the offense and for
So
the
do you
team.
think that had more to do with the fact that he had a year off?
I mean, it's always absolutely possible. Like, again, I don't know what he's going to look like, because again, he's going to have a worse quarterback in Will Levis, but he probably was absolutely. It was 2 years actually off. So you're going to be rusty. But it was also the fact that they had him doing things that he just didn't do in Atlanta. Like, they had him more on the line, having to deal with press coverage, which was never his strength,
Yeah.
and also having to deal with a lot of contested catch opportunities, which again was never his strength. Last year was actually one of his better seasons, and he still wasn't good at it at all in those contested catch opportunities. But again, Calvin Ridley on someone like Miami will be incredible. And I'm not going to BS that. Like, I don't like the fact that he went to the Tennessee Titans, but I can be objective and say you put that boy in that kind of a scheme and it would be fireworks. Like, it would be something serious, a lot like Tyreek. But that's not what's going to happen in Tennessee, because Will Levis can't hit. That boy can't throw. Oh man, Will Levis is a problem, and no one. I mean, if you talk to Tennessee Titan fans, they don't believe it, and I'm just like, dude, that dude is throwing bricks into an ocean. They just don't get intercepted, but they should. So I'm curious about how that's going to look at the end of that season. But I think the Jaguars have made significant progress in what they should do. I just don't know if it's too little, too late. That's really all it
Do you
comes down
think
to.
do you think they had a good enough draft? Do
Oh,
you
I
think
do.
that they any of the spots that they were really of need they actually acquired in the draft?
I do. Like, between adding Arik Armstead first in free agency, and then as also getting Mason Smith to back him up on the off chance that he has injuries, and they drafted him from LSU. They needed they needed some beef in the middle to help stop the run. Like they were 9th in the league in rushing defense, but that rushing defense fell off at the end of the season when they, at the same time, due to injuries, when they started going on that skid. And those things they're not random that they match up. That's what it was. There were injuries, and then the defense kind of fell off a cliff at the same time as Trevor Lawrence being injured, offense falling off the cliff, and they end up just fumbling the rest of the season. I think they've cured a lot of those issues. And again, my only real concern is, are they going to stay healthy as far as maybe Mitch Morris, because he's had 6 concussions in 8 years. You have to be concerned about that. Or otherwise, you're going to be right back to Luke Fortner again. Well, with the same guy who you blame for most of these issues. If Mitch Morris gets hurt, you're right back to the same problem. And also, as far as the defense, they have brought in Ryan Nielsen from Atlanta, and he did really well in Atlanta. And the hope is that he's going to bring that aggressive defense, man-on-man defense, to the Jaguars. But is he going to be able to immediately create that same spark that he did in Atlanta in his first season, or is that going to take some time? Because the Jaguars kind of need to win now, and they don't have a lot of time to kind of, I guess, figure it out. So that's going to be the real question, like early in the season, early in training camp, early in preseason even, is how does that defense look if they're able to just buy the offense weeks, 1, 2, the first few weeks to get acclimated. I think this team is going to be better than most people think. And I know I hate the fact that I sound like a homer because I hate homers. I'm just telling you what I feel like by looking at the tape, and this is what it shows me, that people are too low on the Jaguars, in my opinion.
Well, I mean, this right here is what he's going to get graded on this year. Is can he be that guy that elevates the guys around him? Because now he's getting paid. So now you don't have an excuse. Everybody's going to look at it as, are you that guy?
But that's the funny thing, because that's all he's done. Like we have this conversation like we don't have a book to base it on. All he did was every single receiver that they've added to this guy's team, he's exalted them to career years. Evan Ingram. We were talking about this guy potentially being out of the league in 3 years before he signed in Jacksonville. We had New York Giants fans all over the timelines just clowning the Jaguars for making the pick. And then he hits year high numbers. He has over 100 receptions, nearly sets an NFL record last year in receptions. The year before that was, again, a Pro Bowl Pro Bowl tight end. No one's talking about him no more. Like, you got Christian Kirk, same situation. People are going crazy about how much they paid him, and all of a sudden, oh yeah, he's worth the contract. Now he's easily a top 30 receiver, and his contract's like in the 20s at this point. Like, you know what I mean? All these things.
Evan Ingram, I can agree with in terms of he needed to get out of New York.
Yeah,
it was absolutely necessary for him to get out of New York, because he just had bad hands at bad times. Yeah. There were 3 times he kind of handed a ball to a Philadelphia Eagle.
Yeah,
that I could almost account for. So I mean, those are real statements. That being said, I'm going to switch one last time here because you guys are getting a new stadium, are you not?
They're still negotiating it, but it's sounding like it's kind of done.
Yeah, I was going to say, it sounds like it's pretty much.
It sounds like it's kind of done. I mean, as long as they don't fumble the ball, the politicians don't fumble the ball at the last second. Well, it sounds like it's kind of done.
I mean, it's the Jags, so.
But as a resident of that area, is that something you are for?
Oh yeah. Oh yes. I mean, they needed a stadium redone. Even when they redid the stadium, when they added the pools and the jumbotron and everything else. I don't know how many years ago that was. Maybe 8 or 10 years ago. Even since then, we've all known the bones of the stadium. Like, that was something that just simply needed to be redone. So they're finally going to get to it, and we'll see what the process is going to look like for that season that they can't play in Jacksonville. Because that's going to be interesting. They're talking about potentially playing 3 games in London just for that one season, and they may play in Daytona, they may play in Orlando. I guess we'll kind of just figure out what that's going to look like, Gainesville or Orlando. But as a resident of the area, I think you're not going to find very many people that's going to be against this, especially the deal that was originally proposed. I mean, it's a pretty solid offer for both the city and the team, because they're not increasing the taxes to get it done.
Well,
so there is no tax increase.
Right. They already had a 6% increase for a different thing that was already previously enacted like years ago, and it was going to expire, and they were like, all right, we're just going to extend the same tax that you already see. There's no, as far as your money's concerned, you're not going to feel any difference. It's going to be the exact same thing, and everybody's like, all right, good job, that's great. Everybody's happy, everybody kind of wins.
It does sound like there's going to be a little bit better parking and stuff with the new.
Definitely.
Of course, the one Super Bowl you guys had, we played in, so I wasn't real happy about that. Especially since the Patriots cheated in that game that way. But
Don't they always?
we don't talk about that stuff anymore. So I wouldn't mind you guys having another Super Bowl since the only one you guys had we played in. And I figure anytime Jacksonville has a Super Bowl, the Eagles got to be there. So I'm game.
I won't BS you. We're never going to get a Super Bowl again. I can't even pretend on this one. The Jaguars don't have enough hotels, and until the city gets on board, changing and updating how downtown looks in that Riverwalk area, they're never going to. The NFL is never going to allow the Jaguars to get another Super Bowl. They'll get a draft, they'll get a combine, and all these other things. They have the one hotel, yes, but they need a lot more. Like even for the Super Bowl, they brought cruise ships and things of that nature in. They're trying to kind of cure it. It just didn't work as well.
I wasn't going to say anything, but I'm glad that you brought it up, though.
Yeah, that's not going to happen anytime soon, until you see significant changes downtown, like a lot more lodging places.
As we get to the top of the hour here, we do got one question for you. Seems like a good way to wrap the show up.
Jeez. At least you got one. Seattle will never get a Super Bowl. Huh?
That one popped up as I was clicking. So, so what do you think your Jags record's going to be?
Oh, man. Sight unseen. I got to go 10-7. It'd be hilarious if they go 9-8 for the third year in a row, just because I think that would be just dope. And if they won it in like a tiebreaker type of situation, because I do see the Texans being feisty, and I see the Titans being last in the division. And that's just currently my personal opinion.
So definitely better than this.
Better than this.
Better than that.
Better than that.
Yeah, you're not going to fall apart.
Yes, I do believe
those dead horseshoe crabs.
I believe they'll be better than what people think that they'll be. That people were talking about 13 wins at the start of last season, and now you don't hear anybody having that conversation. That think they know they're going to be in a dogfight, and I think that's where the Jaguars play best, is not reading their own headlines. So I do believe there'll be a 9-win to 10-win team.
So, but you think Houston wins it again?
Oh, I don't. I think Houston takes a step back, and I think people are going to be having the same questions they're having about Jacksonville about Houston next year.
Oh, I disagree with that.
I know you have to, and I understand why.
I'm not a hater. Trust me, I got no skin in your game, so I could care less. I know that you guys are coming up to Philly this year again. Mm-hmm. And the last time you guys came up to Philly, you guys were ahead by like 21 points. How much you guys lose that game by?
Man, don't talk about that. That's you over you twisting knives now. That's not cool, man.
Right.
I know it was a rainy day. It was a rainy day.
Yeah, we fumbled that game away, man. That was crazy.
But you know what? I love the super fans down there. You guys have a good group of super fans. You do have a loyal fan base. They're always yelling Duval, stuff like that. And so I get it. I understand. Out of all the places, you guys are kind of like Green Bay of the South.
Yeah. We just got to get them championships now. Then we can start getting them, them bandwagon fans. That's what we need. Come on, baby.
You guys really miss Mark Brunell, huh?
No, we got new Mark. We just got to get him some championships. If Trevor Lawrence can win one championship, they're gonna be like Mark who? Like that's where it's gonna be. Like that's all he has to do. Get one of those AFC championships. Maybe get that Super Bowl, and that we'll be having that same kind of conversation. But I do appreciate you guys, man.
To be able to get out on time, let everybody know where they can find you.
Well, as we've been discussing, you can find all of my writings covering the Jacksonville Jaguars on BigCatCountry.com. You can find me on all the socials, Travis D. Holmes, Twitter, X, Facebook, etc. You can find me every Tuesday night on the Inside the Pigskin from the South Florida Tribune, normally with Bo, actually. And you can find my podcast with the student of the game, Kyle Nash, the Duval Dive, a Jaguars podcast, wherever you get your podcasts, Spotify, Instagram, YouTube, like and subscribe. Come on, man. Again, appreciate you having me, bro.
Of course. No, thanks for coming in. And of course, if you're watching the show right now, be sure to like and subscribe. And of course, if you are on Roku, be sure to stay tuned for the next hour. Other than that, we will see y'all tomorrow morning.